welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show. A swashbuckling win over Wigan at the weekend was followed up by a frustrating defeat at Blackburn Rovers last night. And things don't really get too much easier as we welcome a high-flying Burnley to the Stadium Light this Saturday. And to preview the game, I am joined by NationalWorld's Northwest Digital Sports Editor and writer, of course, for the Burnley Express due to that, Dan Black. Dan, how are you, mate? You okay?
Good morning. Yeah, not too bad. Just trying to get prepared for tonight's trip to Birmingham.
Going to say, obviously, we are speaking ahead of the game with Birmingham City tonight. We're just speaking sort of off air before. It's almost impossible with the amount of games you have in the Championship to discuss the most recent game. It'll be before you play the weekend games. So your most recent game actually was Swansea at the time that we're speaking, which was obviously a 4-0 win. I watched the highlights. I think it was a bit of an eye-catching result because Swansea were in form, but you were probably there. How good was the performance?
Yeah, we were just saying off air how hard it is to keep up with the Championship at the minute, weren't we? It's just impossible. The nature of the division, it's unrelenting and unforgiving. You just seem to be at a game every other day at the minute. You know, coming up for breath is just impossible. I was speaking to Vincent Kompany about it the other day, and he was just saying it's an absolute car crash of a division. I mean, it's just non-stop. It's filled with booby traps. They were saying clubs have this kryptonite that they keep passing on to other clubs, and We're 14, 15, some clubs are 16 games into the season, and we're still not really seeing the division take shape yet. It's absolutely ludicrous. You know, at this stage, you kind of start to see a pattern of clubs where you look at it and think, yeah, X, Y, and Z are going to do well. You know, one will storm away. A couple of clubs will be genuine contenders, and then, you know, you could probably identify 2 or 3 clubs that would almost a given for the playoffs. But at the minute, what was I looking at? You know, there's 6 points separate 17th place Wigan to Burnley in second. So it could just all, you know, change in a heartbeat at the minute. And I think until possibly the World Cup next month, we're probably still not going to see it take, you know, any kind of proper shape. But yeah, the Swansea game was exceptional. I tried to get Kompany on it. It wouldn't divulge his opinion, but you know, I think a lot of people feel that was Burnley's best performance of the season. They were good on the opening day against what looked like a poor Huddersfield side, and they obviously beat Wigan 5-1 away, which was a very good performance. But in terms of how they controlled the game with 2 very similar clubs in terms of style, both possession-based styles, I think going into that game, this was Burnley's biggest test so far. You know, you look at Swansea, they'd won 4 in a row, they'd won 5 of the last 6. They were a point behind Burnley, they were scoring goals, dominating possession, dominating territory, and they looked a real threat. And you're looking at it thinking, you know, these are the kind of teams we probably need to beat if we're going to have any chance of going straight back up this year. And they were just magnificent. They just blew Swansea out of the water. And I think, you know, in terms of encouragement and confidence, that will have done them the world of good. It was just a super performance from start to finish.
Looking at that result in particular, obviously that's 3 wins in the last 5, but in total it's 11 unbeaten. So I think if you look at the start of Burnley's season, obviously you started it with a win. I watched that game on the Friday night against Huddersfield, but then it got followed up by a run of like 2 draws and a defeat. But I think it's fair to say, from the outside looking in anyway, Burnley looked like they're hitting their stride. You touched there on asking Kompany if that was the best performance of the season, but from a fan's perspective, how excited are Burnley fans with the run of form they're putting together?
Yeah, I think obviously with the change of management, the change of style, the change of system, you know, they've brought in 16 new players over the summer, lost 13, so it's almost a completely different club at the minute. It's a new culture, different philosophies. So I think you've got to understand that in that situation, it's going to take a little bit of time to gel, regardless of the personnel that you bring in, regardless of the personnel you bring in terms of players, in terms of management staff. It is going to take time for that amount of change to come together. And we saw that at the start. They were good without being excellent. They were dominating games without causing too much of a threat. But you could see slowly but surely every individual was building and building and building, and then them relationships on the pitch started building, and it all kind of came together. And I think, the Swansea game was probably the first time we've actually seen everything click. There's been so many times where they've had 65, 70% possession in games, but only created 2 or 3 genuine chances in front of goal. And I think there was, 10, no, maybe 11 games last 11 games in all competitions where they've taken the lead, and in that spell they've dropped 10 points from winning positions, but they seem a lot more composed at the back now. The game management has improved. The way they're opening up teams is improving, but there's still room for improvement there. So I think it's just about that blend coming together and just fine tuning. I think the exciting thing is that there is still plenty more to come from them.
I was going to say, it feels like Burnley are doing well and not just trucking on, looking up or around automatic potential contenders, if there's such a thing at this point, obviously with the madness of the division, but haven't quite hit the stride that they probably can. And I think a lot of that probably comes down to Vincent Kompany. Obviously, it's a really eye-catching name for 1,000,001 reasons. I'm going back quite a few years now, and the division's obviously changed. But I think I remember when Roy Keane came in at Sunderland, and it felt really exciting, but obviously was seen as a risk by some, and Kompany was the same. And he seemed to have really settled into life at, obviously, at Turf Moor. But how good has Vincent Kompany been, not just for Burnley as a club, but also Burnley as a town, as a city?
I think it just seems to suit them. He kind of loves hard work. He loves the graft. We're a working class town. And I think he underpins the values of the town, of the club, of the community. Nothing phases him. He's just really desperate to get stuck in. Never gets, and similar with Sean Dyche, really, he kind of has that impression that he never gets too down with the lows and never gets too high with the highs. He kind of just cracks on, and whatever happens. It can only control the controllables. He just comes across really well. I think he's happy to have this opportunity. He wants to prove himself. He wants to prove that he can build a Burnley side that's good enough to go up. He's been great with us. He's been very honest, open, very transparent. Doesn't really avoid any kind of questioning. He's not big on addressing injuries or anything like that, which is fair enough sometimes, because obviously football clubs do the research these days and they can kind of work the tactics and lineups around those kind of details. But yeah, he's been a breath of fresh air, and the football that he's introducing is something that we've not seen for a long time, and it's a project, it's an experiment. It's just, I think it's everything this club needed after going down from the Premier League. You had that really, you had those kind of laws of relegation and stuff, and whether we had what it takes to get back up. I won't go into the details of it all, but there were all the news around the debt and everything that accumulated due to the leverage buyout, and this is just it's just kind of rejuvenated the club, and I think everyone's really looking forward to where Vincent Kompany can take them.
It's interesting because we had obviously your colleague who Tom on a few weeks ago from the Preston perspective, and it was about a week after Vincent Kompany described him as looking exactly like Timo Werner, which was relatively hilarious. Yeah, I think you can make quite a living off that. Yeah, maybe it looked like maybe he doesn't need to be a journalist after all. I was going to do the same from a Brad Pitt perspective, but no one's took me up on the offer yet. He seems quite the character, Vincent Kompany, and I think obviously Sunderland, I don't want to bring bad memories back here, but when we landed back in the Championship from the Premiership last time, we appointed Simon Grayson, which I'm sure he's a lovely fella, but it was a really not inspiring in any way, shape, size, or form. The time before that, as I touched on before, we appointed Roy Keane, and that was a genuine character, genuine excitement. I think it's quite easy to get bogged down when you get relegated, and we've seen ourselves, it's easy to go straight back down as opposed to just bounce back well. he's such a big character that it seemed to have really helped Burnley outside of all the tactical aspects and things like that. You work with him quite closely. You said he's been great with you. What have you made of him as a man and a character?
Yeah, he's great. He's got a fantastic personality. He's kind of light-hearted with you. It almost feels as if it's a conversation at times rather than an interview. It's now that the glitz and glamour of the Premier League is gone and your kind of media attendance at press conference dwindles, it's a lot more intimate now. A lot of just mainly locals there now, and it's just like you get the opportunity to build that rapport with them. And I think the good thing about Vincent Kompany is he's been there and done it, but he's not been it's not been hand fed to him. He's not been given a silver spoon. When he went to City, it was before the riches of their takeover, and he's had to fight amongst all that to keep his place in a side of superstars. Help them along the way to the first Premier League title. Continued working really hard, showed his leadership skills within that period, and I think you could almost sense that he would become one of those players that just naturally, fell into management. A lot of his teammates said the same thing about him. His presence in the dressing room and on the pitch and stuff was, really helped them in times of trouble, but also in times of triumph. And he's just I really like him. He's a very good guy, and it also helps that he's had that kind of bedding in period in management at Anderlecht as well, where he was up against it there as well. Didn't have a great deal of money to spend. His superstars were getting handpicked. He was almost reliant and falling back on these youngsters that he had to promote through the academy and giving them their opportunities. And now it's kind of eased that transition into Burnley, because he's working with a lot of young players now that have a great deal of potential. And I think that's kind of helped build his managerial personality in a way.
I think when you look at Burnley as well, and you touched on it before about the players that have came in, the players that have came out, when I think of Burnley, my head still says Ben Mee, Eric Peters at left back. And that's kind of what happens, all these old experienced hardy pros, and Sean Dyche. And alongside that, you associate a style of play with what I'm used to seeing in Burnley, which has been 6 or so years, to be fair. Like Sand won League Cup game, which was a bit of an anomaly a couple of years back. You touched on it being a more possession-based style. From the games I've seen, it definitely seems like a different look in Burnley. But how have things changed under Kompany? What is Burnley's style now?
I think we've not had the luxury of going down to the training ground and kind of having a direct view of his training sessions as yet. But I'm told that if you to go down and watch them, it's like a puzzle, and some of it can be mind blowing. He's really, really detailed and really refined in what he does, and it's a credit to him, and it's a credit to the players that they've been able to kind of buy into it so quickly. It's just seemed quite seamless, really. We saw it in pre-season, and you've got midfielders dropping into right back to kind of dictate the play from deep. We've had interchanging centre backs. The roles of the full backs are completely different. Josh Brownhill's a new player. He's been given a revised role, and we've got pacey, direct forwards that are attacking teams and willing to get to the byline and put the ball into the box, into dangerous areas. And it's just like a jigsaw at times when you look at it. It's completely different, but it just seems to be working so well. It's hard to go into detail myself without actually having Vincent Kompany here to explain it to you, because he's that well rounded and that well crafted in like coaching. He's working to his pro license now, but his knowledge is incredible. And he'll explain little passages of play to you at times. He'll explain like niche little roles of players in specific games against specific opposition, and how that can alternate in certain games against different styles of opposition. And it's really interesting. and it's just been a real pleasure to watch at the minute. There has been frustrations where teams, understandably, have put players behind the ball, and they've kind of said to Burnley, "Come on, you try and break us down." And they've struggled at times because as much as they've played the ball and stretched the play and kept possession, they've not been able to kind of make those inroads in the final third and in the box. But like I said, it's growing, and they'll continue to work on that. And I have no doubt that it will all come together probably before the World Cup, but after the World Cup, I think you'll probably see the best of Burnley.
I think looking at the team as well, I touched on some older names that I associate with Burnley. So I'm looking. I've actually watched Burnley more than most Championship teams this season, not by design, just by pure fluke. When I've had Sky Sports on, I think Burnley have been on almost as much as us. The names that I recognise are the obvious ones. You've got your Jay Rodriguez, your Jack Cork, your Josh Brownhill. Anyone who watches, obviously, the top two divisions of English football, or top three, will recognise those players and their history. Nathan Tella always impressed me whenever I've watched him, but there's so many new players in that squad. You watch them on a regular basis. Who have been the most impressive players this season, sort of throughout the squad? Who's your top three that most fans seem to be picking out?
It's hard-fetched to name a top three, to be honest. I just think for different reasons, different players have done really well. I mean, I won't take too much of your time up, but just going from back to front. I mean, Muric in the nets came in, and I think for a young goalkeeper, he took so much pressure on his shoulders with this new style of play and this new system that hadn't been seen for a long time at Turf Moor. Playing out from the back. And that the onus on him almost to keep the opposition out, but to also start the attacks for Burnley. And I think at first, I don't know whether it overwhelmed him a little bit at first, and he could sense the nervousness from the crowd, because it was certainly visible. And I think it took him a little bit of time to find his feet, and now he's just taking it in his stride, and he doesn't seem fazed by it anymore. And I think for a young keeper to take that on, and to do it under so much scrutiny, is great. And I think he almost needed that baptism of fire to help him get to where he is now. So I just want to mention him because I don't think he gets enough credit for what he's done so far. But aside from that, the danger is the wide areas, and the combinations in the wide areas. The Kompany spoke to us about this formula of finding fullbacks and wingers that can play on the inside and on the outside. Both of them have to do that. So you can underlap, you can overlap. It makes the opposition guess what's going to come next. You can't kind of trap it or pin it. So in Vitino's had limited game time because Connor Roberts has been in there, but Vitino in the games that he's played, he's come in the last two in his natural position at right back. He's been exceptional. Very, very good player. He's combined with Anas Zaroury, a Belgium under-21 international, who kind of came on and played a few cameos and looked kind of promising in those spells. He played against Coventry and was pretty much marked out of the game, but then Swansea just came to life and he was deservedly man of the match. Almost like a two-footed Dwight McNeil. He was incredible. Coming inside, coming outside, infield, hitting the bar line, popping up on the edge of the area. He was just outstanding. He's only 21, so he's just only going to get better and better. Ian Martson, left back, Chelsea lad. Everything about him screams Premier League. The assist for Vitino's opener against Swansea City, you have to catch that one because the cross is absolutely sumptuous. It's delightful. Can improve defensively, I think, and that will come. But getting forward and supporting Nathan Tella, he's been awesome. He's involved in almost everything. I think he was involved in 3 of the 4 goals at the weekend. And then you brought up Nathan Tella earlier. He's just a class apart. He's personally, I think he's too good for this division.
Yeah, me too.
He's an outstanding footballer. He's got everything. his first touch is outstanding. You can watch his goal against not his goal, the penalty that he wins against West Brom. It's a long ball forward from Juric. He just watches the ball over his head and cushions it perfectly and takes it around the keeper and wins the penalty. But there's been a few examples of that this year, and defenders are finding it hard to live with him because he's got a real injection of pace. His ball controls as good as I've seen at this level, and he just keeps defenders guessing. I just don't think they can tell what's coming next. And he's finishing as well. 5 goals this season, second top scorer alongside Josh Brownhill. He's been a real coup for the club this year. It's to get someone of that caliber in at Burnley in the Championship is great. And I think the only concern is that if Southampton continue to slip a little bit, is he going to be needed there? I think he's good enough to get into their side. So yeah, you got Jay Rodriguez leading scorer as well, 7 goals. He's just kind of taking his opportunity and not looked back. And the 2 centre halves are great as well. Taylor Howard-Bellis, England under-21 skipper, and Jordan Bayer, Germany under-21 international, both very solid defenders. Obviously, Howard-Bellis is on City's book, so you'd expect that anyway. And then, yeah, your midfield 3 of Cullen, Cork and Brownhill of that little triangular in there of, just partnered perfectly, really. Cork is the skipper, been magnificent, 33 years old, doesn't look like he's getting any older. He can still, keep up with the young lads in the division. Cullen dictates plays. He's very tidy, and Brownhill's been a lot more creative in his new role. So yeah, sorry to go into too much detail, but it's hard to pick a 3 when they've kind of, as I say, apart from that kind of introductory period, these last 5 or 6 games or so, they've all contributed.
No, we love a bit of detail, so never apologise for that. Love a bit of detail.
Yeah, no, I'll probably just bored your listeners though, so
not at all.
As well.
Not at all. I just don't need.
You can cut half of that out, probably.
The only thing I would say is I wish that you'd gone. There's only 2 that are that decent. But to be fair, I mean, obviously, I have watched the team, and it's interesting. I think one thing that I quite like about Sunderland at the moment, obviously, we're at very different stages because of the history of the past couple of years, but when everyone's fit, that is, our spine of Stewart, Corey Evans, and Danny Barr are great because they're underpinned by a lot of good young youth players around them that are going to make mistakes, but that experience sort of helps. It feels like Burnley is very much the same. You've got that, like, your centre is pretty much experienced. You've got Rodriguez there, who's obviously been around for years. You've got Cork there, as you touched on, 33. Brownhill's been around for a number of years now as well. But it's underpinned by young, exciting players with a lot of hunger. And I think that's, for me anyway, from a Sunderland perspective, that feels like the way forward. And it seems like Burnley sort of agree with my assessment of that. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a very productive formula, isn't it? You need that. Because obviously when Burnley came down, you kind of lost your figureheads. James Tarkowski, Ben Mee, elder statesmen like Eric Peters, Phil Bardsley, Nick Pope went. There was Nathan Collins was one that was coming through, and he looked like a commanding centre half. So it was a bit of a blow to lose him as well. So I think to keep hold of those players that you mentioned and the likes of Ashley Barnes and have them there in and around training, in and around games, is vital, really, because I think putting such a young side in the Championship, which is such a physical, demanding division, you can almost be too vulnerable and a bit too fragile at times. We saw that with a few of the players early on. So to have them there that have been there and have experienced it all and that can kind of, share their experiences, share their knowledge of it, and help bring them through, has been invaluable, really. And you can see it. And Kompany said the same thing. He was desperate to keep hold of some of those names just to help kind of bring these young lads through. And it certainly helped, because you, as good as you are as a side, you still need that experience in it.
Yeah, 100%.
Without that, you just lambs to the slaughter, I think, because there's some very knowledgeable, very experienced, very seasoned pros in this division, and it can hit you very hard if you're not prepared for it. But I mean, they've got a lot of young lads still to come through as well, which is also an exciting part, because you look at the injury list. You got Scott Twine to come back into it. He was last year's League One Player of the Year at MK Dons, scored 20 goals. Darko Cherlinov is injured until Christmas, so he's still got to come back into it. Manuel Benson's on the bench. He's looked pretty decent at the start as well. So they've got a kind of good cohort of young, hungry players that are really determined to prove themselves at this level, and that can only bode well for the future. And God only knows what's going to happen in January as well when the transfer window reopens. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least. And it's just a shame that your boys couldn't do the job at Ewood last night, because we've lost our top spot, but at least that gives us something to fight for on Wednesday night.
I'm going to blame the referee for that, and I think everyone will know why.
Fair enough.
In regards to ourselves, it's funny because we sit 12th, and if you give me 12th after sort of 13, 14 games, I'd snap your hand off. I think I said if we finish 15th at the end of the season, I'd be delighted. But we're probably a tad frustrated because we've had injuries to strikers, both strikers. We've played 9 games now without a recognised centre forward. There's been a few decisions that have gone against us, a few late goals we've conceded. We feel we could be up there as well. I'm not saying automatic, but promotion, 1 or 2 goals here or there, you'd be looking at maybe playoffs. It's really hard to keep tabs on every team in the Championship. I'm acutely aware of that. But from the outside looking in, from what you have seen, are you surprised that Sunderland's return to the Championship has been, quote unquote, as successful as it's been?
No, not at all. I think Sunderland are a big club. They're, in terms of trying to bring players in and try and promote players and build a club. They're a very appealing side to kind of buy into. Big, massive fan base, big stadium. That they've got a bit of history there. So from the outside looking in, no, not really. I don't think the Championship is as competitive as it has been. I think it's a slog, and I think it's very tight. And I don't know if that's because it's every team's good, or where every team's like hitting hot and cold, or whatever. I don't know, but I think it is there for the taking. And I think someone can do well this year. I think they're on 20 points now, which is
something along that line.
Yeah, four off the playoffs. So you by no means out of it. I've seen a couple of highlights this year. I can't remember which game it was, but I saw one of the goals where you've gone from back to front and finished. I know you're unfortunate against QPR. I think you conceded in the last minute against QPR. And from some of the stuff I've seen, you play some really nice stuff. And I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Sunderland, with a bit of a name drop here. But I used to be very close to Gary Rowell, who's obviously a legend up at in your parts. I was best mates with his youngest lad, Peter. So I used to knock about with them quite a lot, and I was always round at their gaff and stuff, chatting football. So I always was kind of had one eye on Sunderland, and we'd always like have chats. So I'd always be up to date with what were going on and who was doing what, and which was always nice. And I've not really seen him for a while, so I do need to catch up with him. So Gary, if you're listening, give me a bell.
I hope he is.
Yeah. So yeah, I always used to, I used to know everything that was going on. He did newspaper columns, radio, he did everything. So you'd always have ear out for it all. And so I've not really, I'll hold my hands up. I've not really kind of heard or seen much of Sunderland this year, but which is, as I was explaining to you earlier, I don't think we've really had a chance to see anyone apart from the teams that we've played, because it's just been boom, 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 boom. Like, from our perspective, it's like press conference, writing up quotes from the press conference, game, writing up the copy from the game, press conference again, writing copy, and it's just been relentless. It's just been jumping from one to the other, and you just haven't really had time to kind of take anything in this season. It's like I looked at the table last night and I was like, wow, that is incredible. Where do you even start with that? How can one division be so close after 15 games? And There's teams that I was really surprised to see up there, teams that I was surprised to see at the bottom. And then I checked it partway through Burnley's game against Swansea, and I'd seen that you were behind against Wigan. And at that point, Wigan was 6th. Mm-hmm. And by full time, they were down at 14th. It's just a mental division.
I think it's why there's such a worry around us sometimes for me, because I'm like, well, if we lose 2, are we then close to relegation? But if we win 2, are we going to then get promoted? And I mean, I was sitting watching the game, and I'll open it. Sorry, Blackburn fans in advance. I'm sure you won't mind. I went, these are crap. How are we getting beat off these 2-0? And my fiance went, top the league. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, you got that wrong. And then she got the live league table up, and I was like, well, fair enough, they've had 2 games then, but I can't actually believe Blackburn are top. They've, for 10 games in a row, won 1, lost 1 up until last night. How are they top?
It's phenomenal. And I think 2 of, I wouldn't say, the team that gave us our best game this season was West Brom, who have been stuck in the bottom 3 for so long. I thought Coventry, without posing a real threat in the final third, were a tidy side, and I don't think they'll be under any threat. And them 2 sides that were kind of rooted to the bottom have given us a bigger challenge than some of the sides that have been at the top. We've kind of struggled against the sides that are in the middle, but I think it comes down to style, a lot of it, because against teams that open up a little bit more, that are a little bit more ambitious, we've been able to kind of play through that and have joy with that. Whereas when you've got slightly less ambitious teams that are coming for a point and then going for a last minute equaliser, we've been a bit more laboured against them, a bit more pedestrian, and then almost slightly vulnerable to the counter at the end. So yeah, it's a funny division. I look at it now and still can't tell you what's going to happen.
No ideas.
But just going back to you guys, I think, for yourself, Tony Mowbray is a very steady manager. I think he's almost the type of manager you needed to come in to kind of settle you into that Championship, steady the ship a little bit and push you almost to that next level. You've only won 1 in the last 6 or something like that, but then again, you've only lost once at the Stadium of Light this season. So I think it's a decent record. I don't think you can grumble at all as a Sunderland fan. And to be that kind of tight to the top 6, a third of the way of the season, I think you should probably be happy with that, really. Like I say, I can't comment too much on the football. You guys know more about that than me. But yeah, I've had a soft spot for Sunderland for a while now, and genuinely hope you guys do well, apart from the 2 times that we play you this season.
Vice versa, mate. Last question as always. I don't know why I'm doing this now, because I'm now about 14 games deep and I haven't got one right. I got the closest I had, and I said 1-0 against Wigan on Saturday, and it was 2-1. That's the closest I've got. I don't think I've had a prediction right in over a year now, so I don't even know why I bother. But I started the show like this way, so I'll finish the show this way as well.
Consistency, that's what we like.
Yeah,
consistency.
I can't see us winning it, if I'm honest. I think we might score. I'll go 2-1 Burnley.
Yeah. I hate predicting Burnley scores. Do you know what? I stopped betting on Burnley because every time I backed them, they always got beat, which is why I stopped giving my predictions. But for you, I'll do it. 1-0 Burnley.
Yeah, I think I'll be thereabouts.
I think it'll be tight. I think we'll dominate the ball again, but I think Sunderland are quite a savvy side, and I think they're a lot better than some people give them credit for. So I think I certainly think you'll frustrate us, and I think you'll create chances. But we seem to have we conceded late equalisers against Stoke and Cardiff, and since that point we seem to have learned a little bit more. And I've said it a lot, but I think those kind of things almost help you in a way. It's almost a blessing in disguise at times, and they seem to have moved on from that. So I'm hoping they can continue that and bag another clean sheet. So we'll go for a tight 1-0.
Dan, my Zoom is almost running out because I'm still too skint to pay for the full upgrade. But I do want to thank you very much for your time. Just before I let you go, mate, if people want to read the stuff that you do, and obviously what you do, because you are my colleague technically, where can they find you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at DanBlack84, and all that stuff is on the Burnley Express website or on our Twitter feed or on our Facebook. And yeah, check out all our other writers as well. Got some very good writers in there. Cover Preston, Blackpool, Wigan as well. So
agreed.
Yeah, give them a read. I'm sure you'll be checking in with. I know you've checked in with Tom already, but I'm sure you'll be checking in with them other guys throughout the season as well. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. You said Tom there, but we meant Timo Werner.
Sorry, Timo.
Yes, of course. Dan, thanks very much, mate.
Don't call him that, though. It gets to his head.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, mate. All the best.
All the best, mate.
Take